They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we love telling you stories about amazing women, particularly, and of course, amazing men too. We don't want to leave them out, but amazing women who are doing amazing things and actually really involved in a personal way with some of the problems and some of the solutions that we need to implement in our country. And I was just blown away by the story of Kate Monroe. You may have seen her. She's been on cable news before. She's got a book out called The Race to Save America. She is the CEO and founder of Vetcom and the housetheheroes.org. And you can give her a follow on social media at Kate Monroe CEO. She is also a United States Marine Corps veteran. Kate Monroe, thanks so much for sitting with us today on Happy Women.
I'm excited to be here. I love when I get a chance to talk longer than 3-4 minutes. So
isn't it nice? I know. That's peeling back the onion a little. So when you see all these things that go on TV or the radio, I mean, literally, it's about a 4-minute talk time. And so to actually be able to spread out is so nice, I think, because you get the full look at the story. Yeah. And before we jump into yours, I'd love to set kind of the groundwork because you are a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Tell us about yourself, really, and how you got started and how you have found yourself in this walk trying to help veterans and also kind of combating homelessness a bit as well. We'll go through all of that, but tell us your story first.
Yeah, I served in the Marine Corps as an intelligence analyst, and I myself in service had a very hard time. I experienced some things that people shouldn't have to experience. You know, I was assaulted when I was a virgin, which is not a fun experience, kind of changes the trajectory of your sexuality. I smashed my nose, an eye socket, broke my elbow, broke my ankle, broke a couple ribs. I just had a very difficult time. And even though it was very difficult, I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't get in a time machine and go back and undo it because I think it gave me a good testimony and empathy and helps me understand, you know, people's struggles better. But I went through a lot. And then I got out of the military because I was not safe. And one of my master sergeants came to me one day. He said, "Hey, Kate, I'm getting out of the service. You know that, right? Next month." And I said, "Yeah, I know you're getting out." And he goes, "But I'm not going to be here and you're not going to be safe. Will you let me get you out of the service?" Wow. And at that moment, I realized the gravity of the situation, because I was only almost 22. So he got me out in a speedy get out, but I got out with nothing. So after being assaulted, having my face smashed and all of this, I, like a lot of vets, got nothing from the VA for all that happened to me. So I went on for a very long time. I had a very successful career. I've been, a sales speaker. I'm an author. I've had a good career, but I wanted to go back to school. So my husband said, "Well, why don't you just use your GI Bill?" Well, it turns out the GI Bill expires at 10 years, and it expired 1 month before I wanted to use it. So then I said, "Well, is there no other path to getting this education?" And he said, "Well, get yourself rated. You can get voc rehab." So I only tried to get rated to go to college. So I ended up getting rated. I used the voc rehab program. I thought everything's great. I'm done with the VA. But then around the time that COVID started, I jumped back into the car business and started a car dealership like the month before COVID hit. It was really great timing, just so you know. If I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't have done it. But on the side of the building, I put veteran owned and operated. And it was like a bat signal. Hundreds of vets came to buy a car from me. They're like, "This is a lady we can trust." Well, the first guy came, he didn't have the money to get a car for the payment. I said, "Do you have disability compensation?" And he said, "What is that?" I said, "Well, how about I get you rated and compensated and you come back and buy a car from me?" Well, I did this about 200 times because then people started to bring me people. And I thought, is anyone rated? Is anyone rated for disability? So I said, this is a massive problem. And so I started to research it. I figured out that there's 10 million veterans not collecting a nickel, not $1. And I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's really where Vetcom was born. That's the problem we were trying to solve was, how can we make this easier? How can we be a good partner to them so they don't quit? Because the VA makes it very adverse. And so that's really where it came to be. we had a long 30 minutes to talk about all the rest, the homelessness, the border, the running for Congress. But that's where the idea for Vetcom came from.
Okay, can we just go back for a second? I was really struck by your comment that you were not safe, did not feel safe, and were told that you were not safe. Can you unpack that a little bit? I mean, I hate dissing the military, but I'd love to just hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, you wonder why we have a recruiting crisis, because there's been a generation of people that have been assaulted, both men and women. 70% of service members will be assaulted. And it's men and women. I mean, it's a very ugly thing. So what happened to me was I thought I was safe at the time, hanging out with my friends that I was serving with, who were the friends of the guy that I was dating, and he went on vacation and we were all just playing, video games together, and it turned, one thing led to another. And I ended up getting pretty violently assaulted, and no one cared about it. They made me, call my mom and dad and tell them I was going to come home, for leave for a couple of weeks. They wanted to give me some time. Well, they called my dad and told my dad that I was trying to commit suicide, and that's why I was coming home. So they didn't tell him I was assaulted, and neither did I. So when I got home, my dad picked me up at the airport, and he was very quiet. And I'm thinking, why is he so quiet? And he just asked me, he said, "Are you going to commit suicide?" And I went, "What?" But I knew if I said no, then I would have to explain why I was really there. So I just went with it. I just let my dad think I was suicidal till only maybe 15 years ago, when I finally told him the truth. He and I had a drink together and I told him the truth. But I was just never safe. In the intelligence community, I was one of only 6 women in a barracks of 200 people, of 200 men. It's not a very safe environment that you find yourself in oftentimes, because there's that mob kind of mentality. And once I started to get hurt, they kind of treat you like a throwaway toy, like you just don't matter anymore. And the not being safe part was that situation could have very easily happened to me again. And I think my master sergeant knew his presence there prevented it from happening, but he was about to leave. So. Yeah.
Really interesting. And it's hard. I think many times we don't know the challenges of the military when we haven't served ourselves. And yes, Katie and I are huge advocates of the military. I'm sure you are too as a vet. But I think one of the things that we have to make sure is that the inner workings are there to support the men and women that are serving. And I think, like many things in government, those are the things that kind of fall behind. And I know that there is a huge instance of people coming out of the military and not being able to find housing, not being able to get back on their feet again. And one of the biggest pieces of our homeless crisis, and I think we can agree that a lot of it is a drug and mental illness crisis, but there are a huge amount of vets here in my hometown of Los Angeles that just don't have housing. They're having housing problems and they don't have the money to afford it. They don't have the job ability. Tell me what's going on and how you noticed that there was that direct link between veterans and some of, at least a piece, a little bit of the homeless crisis that we see in our home state, because I know you're from California as well, Kate.
Well, I think what happened was, after we put Vetcom together and we had the for-profit side of Vetcom, for all the veterans that could afford the service, they would tell us, "Hey, Kate, I have a homeless friend. Will you help them? Hey, I have my buddy sleeping in his car." And so I thought, man, how many homeless vets are there? So I had to go dig again. And then I said, there's 35,000 homeless veterans. I was like, oh my God, we got to do something about this. So I called a couple of my buddies who are, big name people in illuminating our homeless issues. And I said, will you take me out? I want to go out and interview these homeless vets and understand how they got here, so I can see if I can participate in a solution where they wouldn't end up here. Like, how can we, I'm willing to help them get them rated and get money in their pocket, but they shouldn't be here in the first place. So it turns out that there's a couple reasons that they end up homeless. The biggest one, though, is they don't have enough runway to take off financially. And here's what I mean. Maybe they were a tank, mechanic. Well, there's no tanks running around our streets. So they chose a job or were shoved into a job that does not easily port over into civilian life. And they don't teach them budgeting, and you don't leave service with a severance. You just get your last paycheck and then goodbye to you. And you might be leaving the service at 22, at 26, at 28, never having had to budget for food because you've been getting paid your food, your housing's been covered, your health has been covered. And now you have about a 30-day runway to take off and get a job. Well, now you got to reinvent yourself in 30 days, and that's not going to happen. So you sleep at your buddy's house, and your buddy's wife gets tired of you being there, and then you sleep in your car, and then you can't pay for your car. It gets repossessed. You sleep in a park, in a shelter till you're on the street, and then you get depressed and anxious and scared, and people offer you drugs. Like, it doesn't take very many steps for people to become part of the drug population on the streets. They don't necessarily start there, but they end up there. But there's more resources for veterans than any other category of homeless, really. And so I would say if anybody knows any homeless vet, there are 1,000 resources to get them off the street. You know, there's the VA HUD-VASH program and other things, but I just wanted to go out and figure out, can Kate be a solution here? So our company became a skill bridge provider. Are you familiar with the skill bridge program?
Mm-mm.
I've heard of it. But explain.
Very, very quickly. All it does is you apply to the DoD, which we did. The Department of Defense said Vetcom is a good and safe landing spot for our active duty military personnel. So what it means is you can be on active duty for 6 months. They will continue to pay you while you work here for me. So that the second you transition, you have a job at Vetcom, paying you probably more than you were making in service, and you're working for veterans, and you have, you know what to be doing every day. It's a good soft landing spot. So that's one of the big things we did, was to become, so I would say about a third of our employees, our skill bridge, are still on active duty, and they're ready to make their transition to civilians here at Vetcom and have their job already set up. I would encourage more businesses to do that for our veterans.
So the Trump administration put a really big emphasis on how our vets are treated, and I think they made a lot of great strides forward. It seems like the Biden administration is just more interested in pushing their progressive ideology. What are you seeing from your perspective in terms of how vets are getting treated? Have you seen a difference in the two administrations?
The dichotomy between the two is staggering. It's appalling, really. So under the Trump administration, he came up with the community care model so that they could, if they couldn't go to a VA provider, they could go to community care. So they weren't waiting, and so that they also had continuity of care. So they had both things. Also, they unfurled the backlog in the VA rating system. So things were moving like a well-oiled machine. Things were going the right direction. Veterans were excited about their relationship with the VA. And then this administration came in and now pretends there is no community care, even though there is. They took it off their website. So they don't want to pay for community care. They took the VA HUD-VASH program that is supposed to house homeless vets and reallocated those funds to house migrants. That's why there's been a 19% increase in homeless veterans. It was going down under President Trump, and it has gone up. It was going down by 12%. Now it's gone up that 12% and another 19%. So I just think that today's veteran feels very set aside by this administration, just like you see with the African-American community and the Latino communities feeling like they are now a subset, below our illegal migrants. So it's very unfortunate. And the continuity of care has forced more people to end up committing suicide. They don't have the continuity of care for their mental health, and they're ending up killing themselves. And it's very ugly.
When we talk about homelessness, I think that there are lots of reasons people find themselves there. Yes, serving the country. Some vets fall into that. I think there are people who don't have money or haven't found programs that will help them. A lot of that is, of course, mental illness and drug addiction, which I think go hand in hand. You try to use drugs as a Band-Aid sometimes for mental illness. When you started really digging into the homeless crisis, I think in California specifically, but I think Democrats across the country, when they're dealing with homelessness, they just want to throw money at the problem. We're spending an incredible amount in California to deal with housing. But in my mind, this is not a housing issue. We need to get to the root cause of what is creating these circumstances that puts people in a position where they don't actively seek shelter, because many of them don't. And that's a very human instinct. So something obviously breaks there. There's a disconnect. Yeah. What do you think needs to be done aside from money and financial resources to fix this the way the law is now? Because we can't just force people into situations they don't want to be in.
Well, I have been saying that we need to create a base camp model, sort of like a forward operating base in the military. And they can erect these within 3 days. We put up bases in other countries with full cafeteria, full bunking systems with AC, everything. All of this exists, and it's sitting in warehouses here doing nothing. We could build base camps. First, we would put all the veterans there. because they would be a good, infrastructure for everyone else that would come there. There has to be a long enough runway for people to get off drugs. The system we have now provides 28 days. If you talk to homeless, they will tell you, I have gone to these programs 6 or 7 times. I have learned about myself that I have been on drugs for 17 years and 28 days isn't going to cut it. So I'm not going to go anymore. I'm not going to go inside. I'm not going to have to leave all my stuff, even though it's junk for the most part. It's my stuff. And now I got to start over with new stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they're just tired of it. And the other problem is we want to transition people from the curb to inside without transforming their lives. We do not have the appetite to transform people. That is the real problem. We would rather give people Narcan, put them inside until they die so that we can collect money for the homeless industrial complex. The only way you can have a state spend billions of dollars to lessen homeless and then it goes up is because that money isn't being spent on the actual solution. It's being spent on the problem to make the problem bigger because it's a money stamping machine that nobody wants to lose. That's the truth of homelessness. And people get there. It is a drug crisis. I have been to San Diego, to LA. I have walked the Tenderloin. I was just in Portland and had somebody smoke fentanyl above my head, and I almost had to call an ambulance. Wow. It is a scary situation that these people find themselves in, and there's no way out of it. If we don't step in and build these base camps and give people infrastructure, they will turn into zombies and die on our street.
So I'd love to shift to another sort of aspect of this crisis, which is how it's impacting our children. So I know you have a really big interest in the border. You've been great on the border, outspoken about the border. You said something that actually made me think about this in a way that I had not before. And that is, I don't think we are taking seriously how we are endangering our own children because of what's happening at the border. And I was thinking about the fact that, in my own life, and I don't know if the two of you, because you're younger, maybe don't feel as much the same way, but certainly when I grew up in the 60s and in the early 70s, we all grew up under a regime of benign neglect, right? Our parents we could go do anything, right?
And same here. Yeah. Okay. No one knew where I was at any given time.
Right. And I think, and it's a very different day and age. And I find now, I think that I felt that with my own children, I was much more vigilant and much more careful. But what you said actually kind of made me rethink that, because I think the problem is in being more vigilant, many of us as parents thought about the threats, sort of older threats, without thinking about the newer threats. So I'm thinking about a few things. Okay, technology. We don't have to go into that, but obviously the stuff that's on their phones is a huge threat. But let's talk about 2 other things that are directly impacted by the border. And this is something you've raised. One is the fentanyl coming across the border. I was at a breakfast the other morning with our first lady from Virginia, Suzanne Youngkin, and she had somebody hold up a packet of sugar. And she said, and there were probably 75 to 100 people in the room. She said, this packet of sugar, if it was fentanyl, this would be enough to kill everybody in the room. It is killing, last year, I think 110,000 people. That's one crisis. And the other one is, who is coming across our border? And are they driving our kids around in Ubers?
Yes, they are. Yes, they absolutely are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so when I was down at the border recently, I took Fox Digital came out with me and we did a story, and we were about 50 yards to the border wall. We were walking that direction, and a group of 7 or 8 migrants started walking toward us. And I could tell that they were of some Middle Eastern descent. I couldn't tell where yet. And I asked them, where are you from? And they said, we're from Turkey. And I said, oh, okay. My husband's Turkish. People like to play that Kate's a discompassionate person. I'm like, my husband is a Turkish immigrant, so stop that nonsense. So because they were Turkish, I said, oh, marhaba nasılsınız? Like I said a little bit of Turkish. So they were so excited that an American that looks like this knew any Turkish. They started hugging me. They were so excited that somebody knew their language that they ended up talking to me, where they probably wouldn't have talked to me. It just was like pure luck. And I asked the guy, tell me about your journey here. He said, oh, I flew to Guatemala. They said, no, it's illegal. Go back to Turkey. I went to Brazil. They said, no, you can't come. He said, so then I got back to Turkey, and my friend called me and said he made it into America. So he says, my friend gave me the number to the cartel, the phone number to the cartel. Me and my friends, we each wired them $6,500. And then I fly and they pick me up and then they just drop me off now at the wall. Like, this is how easy it is to deal with the cartel. You have to sell them a little bit of money and then they'll pick you up and bring you right to the border. I said, well, what is your plan to make money? And he said, oh, we're going to drive DoorDash. I said, when? He goes, tomorrow. I said, oh, tomorrow you're going to drive? Oh, yes. All my friends are in Santa Monica right now, driving DoorDash, driving Uber, all these things. Well, they don't have licenses. So there's the Chaldean cartel in LA and in San Francisco has people sign up to drive people who do have licenses. And then these people drive under their licenses. So yeah, you have a high school student. You might want to think twice about who's going to come pick your child up at 12 o'clock when you don't want to get out of bed. Because it might be somebody.
I want to add to that just to kind of confirm what you're saying, because I didn't really understand what was going on. But we've had a whistleblower come forward here in Virginia, and they have said that people are coming in as proxies to get driver's licenses for others and to register cars. They'll come with the same fake passport, use it over and over and over again. And I think that's how they're doing this. That's an incredible story.
Oh, it is happening all the time. The other thing that you'll find at the border, I've been down there and spent 6 to 8 hours on a day where you'll see, 40 to 80 people will come over every other hour. And a lot of times it's all men, all of them young. And every single one of them paid the cartel. The cartel dropped all of them off. And 30, 40, 15, 20 people all will be carrying the same luggage, the exact same luggage bag that's not getting searched. I can tell you it's pretty easy to connect the dots. What is in that luggage? And the Border Patrol is not allowed to search it. So not only can they not get searched, we then put them in a bus, take them to the transit center, and then immigration pays for their plane tickets to fly them all around the country. It's absolutely crazy what goes on. The amount of drugs that come over from China and from Mexico through our border.
I'm very interested in China because obviously the Biden immigration plan has totally enriched the cartels. I mean, just as you mentioned, it's just incentivizing them to bring people in and to make money from it. But the Chinese are a huge element of, I think, the next rung of people that are exploiting our border, our southern border, coming into California right now. It seems that the Chinese are the most prevalent. And these are single men. These are people who are coming into the country. We don't know exactly why. What are you seeing from those individuals who are coming here from China? Because you would think it's very difficult from the people I've talked to that have gotten out of China for them to just come without some kind of connection or okay from the CCP. So what do you think when you've seen that action happening at the border in California?
Well, the interesting is sometimes you're down there and everyone is from China that came across in that wave of people, right? It might be a back to back. But then a lot of times there's some Chinese, all of the stands represented, some people from Ecuador, Colombia. It'll be a mixed bag of people. Everyone but the Chinese will talk to you. Everyone but the Chinese will raise their hand. Everyone but the Chinese will give you a hug. The Chinese typically have a mask on. They will not talk to you. They hide their faces. So you got to wonder why, if they're just like all the rest of these precious people that are coming over, why are they hiding? Why do they not want to talk to you? And it's because whatever they're here to do, bring drugs across, stage themselves, for some kind of takeover in our country, I could tell you it's not good. There's no reason for a bunch of 20s and young 30s Chinese people to be coming over in waves, because it just came out recently that the Chinese, and I believe it's their government, paying $30,000 a head to the cartel to bring them here. They pay the most. Wow. Turkeys, most of them pay about $6,500 to $10,000. China's paying $30,000 a head. It's crazy to me. I don't even know why the cartel needs to sell drugs anymore. Why you're just trafficking people over here. You're making as much money. Why are you bothering with the drugs? And the Chinese drugs in Portland, the homeless will tell you, if you're going to get drugs, they better be Mexican drugs from the Mexican cartel and not from China, because the China one have trank in them and it'll just melt your skin right off your body. I mean, so even the homeless know you shouldn't do the Chinese drugs because they're too aggressive.
Wow. All right. So you've written a book.
Yes.
Tell us about your book, and what is the book going to teach us?
Well, The Race to Save America, I started writing it when I was running for Congress. So it meant two things. So not just my race, but this race all the way up till November, this race can save America, but it's also the race against time to save America from an inevitable event horizon where there will be no repentant point to turn back. So the book is our country's way back. It highlights every problem we have, from homelessness, sex trafficking, drugs, veterans affairs, our two-party system, every single thing that's a big outlying problem. There are multiple solutions for it in that book. If our government got that book and they read it, they would have a very easy path to victory to get us back where we need to be. It's not a fun, political thriller read like it looks on the cover. But it's definitely something that you could read in, a couple of hours and go, maybe there's something to this. So that's really, it's a solution book. That's my whole brand, is solution provision.
I love that. And that's what we're about here too, because yes, it is always fun to just complain about the problems that you have, but at some point you got to make the solutions happen, right? Yeah. We want it. That's what makes us happy women. We have something to work towards. Kate Monroe is with us. You can give her a follow at Kate Monroe, CEO. She's the CEO of Vetcom. Her book is called The Race to Save America. And in that vein of solutions, Kate, I would be very curious, because your specialty has become truly veterans, homelessness, the border. These are great things. This is, I'm sure, what helped fuel that run for Congress for you, which I'd be interested in hearing about. But what do you think, if you could just be in government at this moment, or if it was Kate Monroe's world, what are one or two things that could be done today that would make all of those things better in some respect?
Well, let's take our whole country and just pretend it's California, because we have the most problems. Let's take the whole country and we'll just say the country is California. You would immediately need to turn law enforcement back on. We need to empower law enforcement in our country, whether that's Border Patrol or law enforcement in general, and enforce our laws. Because if we enforce our laws, then if you built a base camp for homeless and drugs, you could go to people and say, hey, newsflash, you now are going to go to jail for a considerable amount of time for selling fentanyl on our streets and being actively doing drugs in public, or you can go to base camp. But there will be no camping here on the sidewalk where our nation's people are trying to just get to work. So then if there's both things, then you can force people to do the right thing. 1, 2, don't make me the president, because I'll tell you right now, I would shut down our entire country until we went and found every single person who's doing child sex trafficking. Our nation is the most insidious buyers of children in the world. We are disgusting. It is in the book. I interview the guy, Paul Hutchinson, who did The Sound of Freedom. I interview him for this book, and the things that he tells me in the interview we have in this book is astounding. Like, he's like, I can tell you where everyone in the entire country is that's looking at child porn right now. Try to go to sleep knowing that, right? So I would end that. All of the drugs, the prosecution for bringing drugs into our country should be so high that people should be scared to literal death to try to deal drugs, traffic drugs, anything. You're involved in the death of a child because of drugs, you're in jail forever. No, you don't get to pass go. No pass go. So base camp, and we have to shut the border immediately. There's not all these compassionate, precious people coming through. There's absolute lunacy that we are doing at the border. You have to shut the border. We have to build these homeless base camps, stop all the drugs, stop the child sex trafficking, and turn our law enforcement back on. That is what we should be focused on. What we are doing is sending all this money to Ukraine while 3 world wars are about to break out, while Russia's camping off the coast here, while we're in a recruiting crisis, and we should send our nation's little darling, like little girl babies to war. No, like absolutely not. People need to vote with their senses and not their emotions this cycle. Let your petty emotions go, and just remember, I was safer, a few years back. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Kate, one last question. I love the fact that you encourage people to do hard things. Yeah. Jen and I are big advocates of that as well. We realize it's the only way we're going to turn this country around. Yes, we 100% have to vote and get the right people back into office. But truly, we're not going to win this cultural war unless every citizen gets back involved and fights for this country. But I'm just curious, can you think of something in your own career, on your own path? What was one hard thing that you did?
Well, Honestly, keeping Vetcom going was really hard in the beginning because it took a considerable amount of my personal effort while I was having to run another coaching business just to pay to push that rock up the hill to get it launched in the face of veterans treating us like trash in the beginning. It was very difficult to bridge that gap. But I think, being in the Marine Corps was hard. Working in the car industry was hard. Being in timeshare where every single leader is a male and they want to treat me like I'm not as good as them. Everything I've done has been hard. But I think that you can choose how you react to adversity. The power of choice is the most powerful thing that you have. I was assaulted. I could have let that ruin my whole life and derail, the rest of my life. But a chaplain told me, you have the choice. When you go to bed tonight, decide if this was an event or if this is something that has to now change your whole trajectory. And at that age, I went, I have this much command and control over the rest of my life. I'm going to choose to lay it down. And I would just say everything's been hard. Keep going. That's how life is. Life is hard. It doesn't have to be easy. It's not fun when it's easy.
That can be fun when it's easy. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I get bored pretty quick. I'm looking for the next adverse hard thing to conquer. I'm a conquering kind of person, like running for Congress.
I like that too. I like it too. It's a good blend. You appreciate the good times when you have some of that adversity for sure.
Yeah, the hills and valleys.
Yes, exactly. Kate, you're such a delight to talk to. And we thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It's really important to raise awareness about these subjects that aren't the prettiest. And they're the ones that people don't like to see because they aren't glamorous. And so we thank you for bringing light to our vets and to the border and, of course, to those suffering and the homeless population. Kate Monroe, thanks so much. Give her a follow, Kate Monroe, CEO on social media platforms. You can also check out Vetcom. That's where she is CEO. And, of course, The Race to Save America, wherever you get your books. Kate, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you guys for having me. I truly appreciate it.
We thank you. And we thank you all for joining us. This has been another episode of Happy Women. Don't forget to get Katie Gorka's book right now, Next Gen Marxism, wherever you get your books. You can also check her out online, katiegorka.org. You can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram at Jennifer Horn Radio and on Truth and X at Jennifer Horn. Don't forget to like our podcast, share it with your friends, give us a 5-star review. We always appreciate that. And we thank you for joining us. This is a Happy Women podcast.